you start to question your value. You start to question your self-worth.
Like, the more money you got, the more successful you are, and most people really do buy into that.
But really, I just needed a break.
What I love is helping people.
I'm Julie Bauke, and welcome to The Evolved Career, a podcast where we help you determine what truly does matter most to you and how it can have a profound impact on your life. My guest today is Chris Dorris. Since 1994, Chris has served as an advisor, consultant, and mental toughness trainer and personal transformation coach to lots of cool people. And we'll talk more about that. Chris, when people ask you, tell me about yourself, or what do you do? What do you say?
It depends on my mood.
Okay.
I have a lot of different answers for that. And if I'm playful, I'll say something like, I am Viagra for the mind.
Okay.
I'm a mental coach is another answer. If I'm really bored, if I don't want to pursue the conversation further, like if I'm watching a game and someone's distracted, say, hey, what do you do? I'll just say I'm a life coach. That's a pretty boring answer these days. I refer to myself probably most often as a success coach, and I define, and this is going to be really relevant to our conversation today, my current definition of success is having your life on your terms, right? And it doesn't matter what your terms are. They're just yours. And I cannot think of a more effective and appropriate definition for success, because historically success has been defined conventionally really just about money. It's like the more money you got, the more successful you are, and most people really do buy into that. But I've coached so many people who have so much wealth and have no joy.
Yes.
That cannot ever be successful, right? How could that be successful? So I say I'm a success coach, and what that means, and I use the primary methodology that I use to help people have their lives on their terms is mental toughness training, which is very simply put, Julie, is the psychological equivalent of physical training. So it's working out the mind.
Okay, great. Now, you said sometimes when you're bored or you want somebody to leave you alone, you'll just say, I'm a life coach. Now, which reminded me of something I saw, maybe it was on Facebook, maybe it's in one of your daily tips or something, where someone said to you, what qualifies you to be a life and success coach? So let's back up. Tell me about the pivot points or the highlights of your journey from that first career, which I believe was in social work, to
you're right,
a mental toughness trainer. You don't do that overnight. What were those key moments that took you on that journey?
Okay, well, it's funny that you prefaced that. That was actually perfectly articulated, because it's funny because the answer to the question, I got that question asked.
Yeah.
Actually, it was when I was visiting my birth mom. I'm adopted, and I was reunited 11 years ago, and we have a super amazing relationship. So I go visit her, and she visits me. And I was visiting her, and we went out to a jazz club, and it was all really old people. I'm 51 years old, and I was the second youngest person in the room, and I know that because I was sitting next to the youngest person in the room, and we had a good laugh on that. But this beautiful woman had just heard the story of my reunion with my mom, and she said, so what do you do? And that's when I said Viagra for the mind, not realizing I'm surrounded by all geriatric people. They didn't really appreciate that. But anyway, she asked me that question. She said, I said, I'm a life coach. I help people close the gap between how their lives are and how they want them to be. And she said, oh, wow, that's so fascinating. What qualifies you to do that? And she wasn't asking challenging, who are you? She was like, so what, what's actually legitimately, where do you live? What qualifies you for that? And I said, it's a beautiful question. Let me start to answer by telling you what doesn't qualify me. And I went on and on saying, about my degrees, my graduate degrees by having traveled around the world and studied with some of the greatest minds on the planet, like Deepak Chopra's, and having gone to India and done Oneness University, and having gone to South Africa and studied with the Sangoma and all this stuff, and not having written books, not having read jillions and jillions of self-help books, and having, done who knows how many hours of weekend workshops on personal development. And all that stuff has been tremendously valuable in sharpening my saw and my trade, but it isn't the appropriate answer to the question, what qualifies me as a life coach? And the answer is simply my love for people, my belief in people, and my passion for serving them. That is what qualifies me. And now that brings us all the way back then to the beginning. All right, and you asked me about some pivot points. And when I think back over the course of my career, there have been jillions of pivot points, but like the big ones, I would say there are a few. And the very first one was to honor that, what I just said. My response to this woman recently, what qualifies you to be a life coach? And by the way, we're going back to 1994, right? And life coaching wasn't a thing.
Right.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that life coaching
definitely not.
wasn't a career. In fact, it's coaching, right? Coaching as it is nowadays, like executive coaching, business coaching, life coaching. None of that stuff exists. The only coaches in the world were sports coaches. So at the time when I was coming out of college, if someone asked me the question, what is one of the most courageous, possibly the most courageous decision you've ever made, and it was to trust against a lot of people's better judgment or not, against their advice and against their fears. It was to trust, and I'm going to say this in like a long, poetic way, but I'll simplify. I trusted that inherent within my passions were the mechanics for their own fulfillment. That was a simple way of saying that is I just trusted what I loved. What I loved was helping people. That's it, period. Simple as that. I had opportunities to take jobs in New York City. I got into law school, and the only reason I had applied to the law school was because I thought I was supposed to, because I have a sister who's a CPA and a sister who's a doctor. So like doctor, CPA, social worker.
Candlestick maker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it was the egoic pressure to do that. And I never even went. I never even attended. I thought, this is not my deal. This isn't for me. What is helping people in some form or fashion. So that was the first. By the way, there's a great book that I read that really helps me do that helped me make that decision, which was to say, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's going to look like helping people. I don't know how I'm going to make money, but I'll figure it out. And the book that helped me make that decision is called Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow by Dr. Marcia Sinitar.
Yes, a classic.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's a classic.
I'm looking at it. It's on my bookshelf. I read that book in 1994, and it helped me, Actually, I read it in probably 1990. And it helped me, because that's when I was a social worker from 1990 to 94 after college, working on the streets of Atlantic City, making no money, but doing work that I knew would lead to something, but I didn't know what. Now, that leads up to the second pivot point, which is as I was a social worker, I'd been a basketball player in college. Now, this is serendipity. And I totally believe in synchronicity, right? So I was a basketball player in college. I was playing while I was doing social work at the Jersey Shore. At nights, I'd go play, pickup games, play hoops down at the elementary school. And one night, I shattered my leg. Really bad break, compound fracture. And I almost died from it because I got an infection. I had a fatty embolism, gave me pneumonia. I was on an ice blanket in Princeton Medical Center for 8 days. So after that, I'm like, that's enough hoops. I played from 5th grade through college. We're good. I'm going to shift now. I'm going to shift all of my athletic passion over to golf, which I'd only played like a bit of throughout my youth. So I got really, really passionate about the game. And while I was playing, I rapidly discovered how mental it was. And it's at that point that I decided I am going to marry my and all this while, by the way, for that entire 4 years, 90 to 94 after college, I was totally floundering. I was doing social work, but that's just because I needed a job. But I did want it to involve helping people. And I did not know what it would lead to, but I knew it wasn't going to stay that. I was exploring the Peace Corps. I was exploring all kinds of different things during that period. And but when I started playing golf and that injury occurred, I realized I'm going to use sports. I'm going to marry my passion for psychology and the human spirit, human potential, with my passion for sports. So I moved out here, and then the rest, and we can get to other pivot points that happened after that.
And you moved from Atlantic City to Arizona?
I did, to go to Arizona State for graduate school in psychology, but to focus on sports psychology. And there's a huge pivot point in that as well, which is a great lesson for folks. So I just continue into that?
Yep, absolutely.
So this is a lesson in having the courage to A, know what you want, and B, ask for it. So it was time at the end of my graduate program to go do what's called the practicum or internship. And I was at a counseling program, so everyone was going off to go get jobs or internships at mental health agencies where I just left. So I wasn't going to go do that again. So that didn't make any sense. That's not why I was there. So I was struggling, and I was having a conversation with a fellow student of mine in the parking lot at Gamage after class one day, and I was telling her, I don't know what to do. Like I'm here to create ultimately to start my own practice in sports psychology. I want to work exclusively with athletes, and this internship is just going to feel like it's a waste of time if I'm going backwards and doing what I've just left. And she said, well, and this has stuck with me. I tell this story all the time. The questions that she asked me 2 questions, and they couldn't have been more perfect. And I am always asking my clients these questions now in my coaching. She said, well, what would perfect look like? And I stammered and said, well, you mean unrealistically, like in a perfect world? She's like, just what would perfect look like? What would be the best case scenario? And I said, well, if we're not being practical about things here, the perfect thing would be for me to do my internship with the men's golf team here at ASU, because I want to work with professional golfers, and they're like the number 1 team in the nation. And so that's question number 1. Now her follow-up question was equally perfect and powerful. She said, why don't you ask? And I looked at her, and I just thought, oh, honey. Yeah,
You're so cute.
You're so cute. Yep. Like, you obviously don't know. You don't just go ask, like the coach of the number 1 division men's golf team, when you have like zero applied experience, and say, hey, I want to be your mental guy. And then I was thinking, I was looking, she's like just sitting there waiting for me to answer. And I thought, I guess the only honest answer is why wouldn't I ask? It's because I'd be a coward. Thank you. So I ended up asking, and I got it. And it became, after I graduated, he hired me. Coach Randy Lyon hired me for the next 10 years. And I worked with all these golfers who are now on tour.
How long did it take you, after that conversation in the parking lot, how long did it take you to work up the courage to approach them and ask?
I had to do it because I needed my internship straight away.
Okay.
That's a great question, Julie, because it probably would have taken longer if I didn't have the time constraint.
Yeah.
Because I remember being scared to death. And I wasn't scared to ask my advisor. I just went to him with a question, like, hey, man, he's a great dude. So I said, is this even a possibility? He said, hell yeah, but you need to get the coach to say yes, and you need to go find someone else who's done applied sports psychology, who is licensed, as a PhD, who can be your supervisor. And I found that. I went to the coach and asked him about that I was nervous about. And in retrospect, it was so funny. I didn't need to be, because he loved the idea. He thought, oh, this is great. And that's part of one of the coolest parts of the story, is how easy it was. And then I found a supervisor who was super psyched over in the clinical psych department. Just asked around, just asked a few people. And Julie, it's an amazing story of how sometimes, how easy it can be to get what we want if we'll just, get clarity on it and just ask.
Yeah. I want to go back to that moment in the parking lot, because I think it's helpful from a lot of different angles. The first one is, we ask our clients, we say, and it's very similar to that question, is what does your perfect 10 look like? If you could clear the slate and write out exactly what your perfect career or perfect life would look like, either in a day, a week, a year, what would it be? And the initial response of virtually everyone is, ugh, I can't have that. In other words, why are you even asking me that? That's a waste of time, because there's no way I can have everything I want. And I'm fascinated by that, because what I say, okay, maybe. But if you know what your 10 is, then you have a greater chance of getting closer than if you don't know what your 10 is. So can we at least say, let's figure out what ideal looks like. And if we know what 10 looks like, we're going to know whether we're considering an 8 or a 6, because we have something to compare it to. If you've got 2 opportunities that come up and one's a 4 and one's a 5, and you get super excited about the 5, it's still a 5. It's the cream of the crap, and you don't want to be living with the cream of the crap.
I've never heard that like that.
Yeah, you can use it. But you have to give me $1 every time you use it. But it's really, you've got to know what ideal looks like. If you don't, you'll never get close. And it's funny how this person just asked you this really simple question that I think it seems so silly to you at the time, and to most people it does, but it really is the crux of getting what you want. And that's being able to visualize and articulate what it is and then put it out there. And I would imagine, like you said, you use that technique all the time now.
I agree, and there's a third element which is as profound as any of the others. So it's A, know what you want, right? Define what's perfect, what you tend. B is declare it or put it out there, and that's huge. Is just tell people, because you never know who you're going to be talking to that's going to be able to help you with it, right?
Right.
Like Teresa in the parking lot at Gamage Auditorium. Thank God for that. Thank God for that conversation, right? I mean, seriously, I don't even want to think about what my life would be like if that conversation.
You would have gotten there some other way.
Maybe, but it probably would have taken a hell of a lot longer, like a whole lot longer, right? And but then the third component. So the first component is clarity, right? Know what you want. The second is be willing to put it out there and share it and talk to people about it and declare it and announce it, broadcast it. The third, though, is move. Yeah. Move towards. One of my favorite mantras is that two words: move towards.
Love that.
Move towards, because I asked, it's like back up a little bit in the chronology here in the story. Is right before I went to graduate school. I was still back in Jersey. I was accepted. I'm on my way, but I was doing some research. I was calling around to the most notable, recognized, published sports psychologists in the world to pick their brains. Right, and that's a good action step. As I look back, I'm like, well, I'm really proud that I did that. I remember it taking a little courage, because they were like kind of famous, in the industry. And I just wanted to reach out to them to say, hey, I want to do what you're doing. Can you just give me some guidance? Like in several years, I want to be like the next you. And it's really interesting. They were all so cool, but they also gave me some really limiting advice, which in retrospect is so paradoxical, because really fundamentally these people who I was connecting with, who their careers are to promote belief, and yet they were giving me some advice that had me be scared. And what that advice was, or it wasn't necessarily, it was advice. It was like, well, you're going to have to get your PhD. I do not have that. You're going to need to be either a professor. I am not that. Or start a clinical practice on the side, or start your own clinical practice in psychology, and then start your practice on the side. I kind of did that, and you're going into this field at a time where it is super saturated. In other words, there are so many people competing for so few opportunities. Bullshit. Mm-hmm. But I believe them. Yep. And I said, okay, all right, well, all right, thank you for that. I'm going to do it anyway. Here I go. They said, one guy said, you're going to need to probably, start off in like bass fishing or bowling. Now, I'm not slamming bass fishing or bowling, but that's not what I wanted. Like anywhere close. I didn't want to work with bass fishermen or bowlers. I wanted to work, although I love both of those things, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with golfers, period. And they said, well,
who doesn't, right? Yeah.
Oh, good. Right, right. Like, good luck with that, babe.
Boy, it's.
And I believe them. But they were wrong, right?
Yeah, they were wrong. On one hand, it's really smart to get the input and advice from people who've been there, done that, people who know you, blah, blah, blah. But it's dangerous, because we can give too much credence to their advice, and it stops us in our tracks. And their advice is based on their experience in the world and their mindset. And that can never replace our own.
Yeah, right on. So so I got this job then, my internship turned into a career, and now it wasn't like a full salary. I was doing 10, 15 hours a week with the team, which was amazing to me, right? What an opportunity, right? An unbelievable opportunity. Now I still had to do, and that's why I said I kind of took that advice, which is I was using my degree and doing some other jobs as a therapist, so I could pay the bills as I grew my practice. And I was in practice with a friend of mine, Dr. Allison Arnold, she is still and was at the time and continues to be like the number one gymnastics mental coach on earth. And she's a damn genius. And she's always been a mentor and buddy and business partner, at the time to me. And I was enrolled in my PhD program, right? So she told me to defer for a year and let's just give it a whirl. Let's just give this a whirl. So here we are giving it a whirl. And she said, you still have your seat in the doctoral program because you believe you need it. Meanwhile, she's getting her PhD. She's just finishing hers up. And she's telling me, CD, maybe you don't need that doctoral degree. She first started to challenge that advice, ironically, as a person who's getting her own. And that's when I first opened up to maybe they were wrong, because the whole time I was just in the belief. This is how it needs. Hey, the superstars told me this is how it needs to be. Who am I to question the sage, And well, she was a sage too, and she said, yeah, maybe you don't need it. And she was right.
Go back to when you were said you were sitting with your birth mom and all of her friends, and someone asked you what qualifies you to be a life coach. And I love the way you answered that, because it really goes back to this time in this early part of your career where you're saying, I'll tell you what doesn't qualify me. And you went on to list all the things that are in a traditional resume. And and then most people, when you ask them what qualifies them or what their background is in whatever it is, they give you that laundry list, sort of that resume answer. And the answer to that question, I think part of your giving that answer goes back to those key moments where you got this bad advice to build your resume, which isn't always bad advice, but it was for you. And then, so it's I see that connection in how you didn't get there in a way that the traditional sages might say to get there, but you got there in your way. So therefore, when you're giving advice, it's really not about laundry lists. It starts from that core where you started from is, I really want to help people. And then you build from there instead of starting from building your laundry list of qualifications.
That couldn't have been a more perfect segue to the next pivot point in my career. So that's right. So Doc Alley would never let me forget that service is the reason I'm even doing any of this, right? Being in service. That she was always reminding me that, is this the decision you're about to make, is it of service? The advertisement that you're creating for your workshop, is it of service? It's such an incredible mentor in that regard. So at the time I was doing these workshops for junior golfers. I created a great relationship with the CEO of executive director is his title, Tom Cunningham of the Junior Golf Association of Arizona. He has since retired, but he was a huge pivot person in my life, in my vocation. So I created a great relationship with him where he permitted me to send out advertisements and use his membership to do these workshops for kids, for junior golfers that then would become my clients. So I was doing these workshops. I was doing one day, and I saw some familiar faces. And I asked the crowd, I was like, kids, how many of you look familiar? How many of you guys have been here before? And a handful of kids raised their hands, and I said, oh, wow, what do you guys remember? Crickets. So I thought, that's terrible. That's terrible. That is not the business model that I'm looking for. I'm here to make a difference, not to have them come back again and again and waste their parents' time and money. So I went back to the drawing board, and I thought, and this is driven by commitment to service. The question I'm sitting at my desk in the question, how can I make these experiences more powerful and valuable to the attendees, to these young athletes? And I thought, you know what? And I came up with two answers. One is, let's do less content and go deeper, which has totally transformed the way I do all of my work. That was a great call. But the biggest call was, let's invite parents to attend for free, because that hadn't been happening. It was just the kids. Parents would drop them off and go get coffee. So now I invited the parents to come and sit in the back. And it was all driven by the desire to serve. After the very first one of those, one of the parents comes up to me and says, this was amazing. I run the sales team at a company here in Tempe called Insight. I want you to come do this exact same workshop with my sales team. that opened, I have goosebumps as I'm telling you this. That was like 17 years ago. This guy has become a great friend of mine, a very, very close friend, and one of the most pivotal comrades in my, and characters, one of the pivotal, most important characters in my vocational story. He's had me now, he's connected me with all these great business opportunities where now I've been on stage, and here's like, this is the final pivot point where he had me get hired as he ascended in his own career and had, bigger roles in these multi-billion-dollar companies. He had me hired to do the closing keynote. This is like after Mike Dickus spoke. I went after him in Chicago on a stage in front of thousands of salespeople from all over the world for a multi-billion-dollar sales company to give a closing keynote for a week-long sales kickoff. And I hit a grand slam. I was never more prepared. We maybe talk about that later if you want. I was never more prepared for anything in my life, and hit a grand slam. These people that were in attendance go to all these. They just, the sales world is very incestuous. People are definitely moving quickly between different companies and opportunities, and they hop and they say, "Oh, we got to get this dude." They called himself a mental coach. We have to have him at our kickoff, and my whole career exploded from that.
So when he first said to you, "I want to bring you in to talk to my salespeople," what was your first gut response to that?
That I was scared to death of that because I was a social worker. I don't think I'd ever been inside a corporate building.
Yeah. I think that's really important. You felt the fear and you did it anyway. And I think that's, it's easy for the listener to hear you say, well, I was coaching all these golfers and, I'd gotten my foot in the door. And sometimes when we hear that from people, we're like, oh, well, then it was all uphill. It was all downhill from there. It was all good. He was on his way. But each step, when this guy said, I want you to come talk to my salespeople, you're probably like, blah, blah, blah. What do I have to teach them?
He even coached me. I remember the moment very vividly, because I remember saying to him, I've never done that, which is a total, why say that? I just got done doing a mental toughness training workshop, and here I am being mentally weak.
Yeah.
He's giving me this great opportunity. I said, I've never really done that. He goes, dude, don't worry about it, man. And he's coaching me. He's like, just do the same, just do exactly what you just did.
Yeah. And this reading your bio, I love to read people's kind of bios on LinkedIn and places, see what they say about themselves. And one of your statements that I want to call out, and I think we can apply this not just to, because people listening, they're like, well, if I read your hold on for a second. Okay. If I read your bio, it says, what began as a commitment to help people feel more excited and enthusiastic about their lives has evolved as Chris is now called upon by elite athletes, CEOs, entertainers, ... I think a lot of people reading that would say, why do entertainers and athletes need to feel more enthused and excited about their lives? They've got it all.
Yeah. Robin Williams was one of my favorite comedian actors of all time. He's been in some of my favorite movies, and man, did he bring so much joy to the world, right? Robin Williams.
Absolutely.
And like Anthony Bourdain.
Yes.
These are people that they just crushed it in their craft. And I loved watching that guy, Anthony Bourdain, and his shows were incredible. And Robin Williams brought so much laughter to my life, and not just laughter, like movies like Patch Adams. That's a real story, and then they commit suicide, and it's happening all the time, right? These are just two recent ones of people that I really loved. And so where's that's why. That's a reason why. It's
yes.
Just assuming that, and I've coached so many people that aren't necessarily famous, right, but are very, very wealthy. I've coached so many mega millionaires. I've coached a billionaire, and many of those people have just empty souls. Like, they're not bad people. I'm not saying that at all. But they don't have the meaning. And I'll tell you, the coolest, I think the most interesting course that I studied in my master's program was on death. And a part of the course referenced research that was done on centenarians. So people who are on death's doorstep, and they were asked the question, so looking back, what would you do differently? And it's fascinating that there is some real uniformity in the responses. And three of the most popular responses were, one, I would take more risks. Two, I would slow down and appreciate how magnificent life is, without me even having to do anything to it, just appreciate. And the third is I would be so less obsessed with my own success and way more interested in making a difference and my legacy and leaving a footprint.
If only we could take that back. And it's just too darn bad you have to get to that age before you're really able to articulate that, because then, you say it's too late, but you've misused your time in terms of, what matters most to you.
So, it's like we're going back to what I hadn't even think of that course was that, being in conversation with some of these folks who are very wealthy, but looking for the meaning. And there's a classic book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. Now, Viktor Frankl was a survivor of concentration camps in Nazi Germany, and he wrote about the experience, finding meaning. If we can find meaning in anything, in everything, if we can find meaning in the experience, we can get through anything. But that's not even the biggest point. It's how the power of meaning. And the centenarians is like, we're all going to be confronted. Well, there's another book by Leo Tolstoy called The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and it's about this guy who, commits his life to like being, quote, conventionally successful, power and money. And then he gets sick, and he's on his deathbed. He's confronted with the question, was my whole life wrong? So really what I want to encourage your listeners to do is to slow down enough, right, and ask themselves the question that you posed a while ago in this conversation, which is, what's the 10? What's your 10? And let's just operate for a little, like slow down enough, like schedule an hour, like a sacred, don't like just kind of like reflect while you're in traffic. No, schedule a time to go somewhere, some place that you love, and know that you're treating yourself with unbelievable compassion right now. And you turn everything off, right? And you disconnect and give yourself an hour of pure love and investment and reflection on the question, what would perfect look like? If I could, regardless of whether I think it's possible or available to me right now, put that crap aside and just answer the question, what would amazing be? And then once you've spent that hour and you have some fun, amazing, moving, powerful ideas on paper, regardless of how different or similar those ideas are to your current exact reality, who cares? Move towards, go do something. Operate from the assumption, just for fun, because you got nothing to lose, that, hey, maybe this is available to me in some form. And my firm belief, Julie, is that it is.
It is. Absolutely.
You said it in the introduction. And I loved it. I loved it, what you said in your introduction to the show, which is the world deserves the best you. That's a badass phrase, and I couldn't agree with you more. The world doesn't thrive from us settling.
So you've worked with people across industry and profession, and East Coast to West Coast, all over the place. What are some of the common threads you see, regardless, industry, profession, gender, age, stage in life? What are some of the most common threads you see among humans, between humans?
I would say that the number one mistake that I have witnessed throughout my entire career in helping professions, the number one mistake that I have observed people make in the pursuit of life on their terms or their desires, right, is waiting, unnecessarily waiting for all kinds of things, like for a bigger bank account balance to feel successful, right? For recognition to feel competent or expertise, right? For a raise or a job offer in the first place to feel qualified or capable. Waiting for all different kinds of things in the outer world in order to feel these amazing states in the inner world, right? Like accomplishment, confidence, right? Reward, enthusiasm, gratitude, expertise, all these high grade states. So I have another mantra that I love, which is called create the state, don't wait. And that's why, I rely on mental training to help people really alter their emotional states at will in a moment's time to create the state that'll serve you in that moment. So what I have witnessed is people waiting and we've all been conditioned to, on varying levels, but none of us are exempt from this. We've all been conditioned to play victim. What that means is victim of circumstance, right? To let the outer world govern the inner world. Can I tell you a little story about that?
Sure.
So a little girl comes home from school, and she's all smiles. And her mom sees her and says, "Oh, honey, look at you. You're so happy. Wow, what happened? Did you make a new friend at school today?" And the little girl says, "No, Mommy, there weren't any new students today." And the mom says, "Well, wow, why are you so happy? You got a sticker on your spelling quiz." And the little girl says, "We didn't have a spelling quiz today, Mom." And the mom comes back again. She says, "Well, I don't understand. What happened? You got cupcakes at recess, didn't you?" And the little girl just says, "We didn't have any cupcakes today, Mom." Now, time out from the story. This is a loving exchange between this precious little girl and her number one role model in the universe, her mommy. It's a beautiful, loving exchange. However, embedded within it is an unconscious, disastrous message to the little girl. Do you know what it is?
That it's just, what you accomplish that matters, that what you accomplish is what gives you a good day or a bad day.
Well, it's that there's no such thing as causeless joy. That you can't just something had to happen, honey. What was the thing in the outer world, the thing outside of you, the thing that's not in your control, right? What's the thing, the excuse that's giving you the right to choose joy right now, sweetheart?
Yeah, that's
right?
great. Yep, and
so
you're right.
No one knows. Of course, nobody knows that that's what's going on, but it's going on.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, it's that's how sneaky this conditioning is. The victim conditioning that none of us are exempt from is so sneaky that it can occur, it can be transmitted like a virus in a computer through a loving communication, right? So that's a common thread. And so it's important for us all to enthusiastically own the fact that we are assigning credit and blame to the outer world for our joy and our pain. And mental toughness is stopping doing that.
Yes,
right?
I love
It's
that.
taking it back.
Yeah.
Right? It's taking back the ownership and saying, nothing makes me happy. People can do, my loved ones can do things to make it easier for me to choose joy, and certainly nobody can piss me off. Nobody can make me feel inferior, right? Nobody can make me jealous. Nobody can make me feel incompetent. Nobody can make me feel competent. I do that with my own thinking. Now that, Julie, has not been a class. And that's really a huge part of why I choose to do what I do, right? Is because we weren't taught how to be the creator. We were actually taught how to do the opposite. We were taught how to be victims.
Yes.
I don't want to sound good,
I love that.
Conspiracist here. This is the human experience.
Yeah.
And we get to grow. We get to turn that around. We get to do that. And the more we're willing to do that work, the much easier it becomes to create a vocation of our dreams.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great ending sentence. Are you ready to play 2 questions, one deep and one shallow?
Oh, sure.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's do the shallow one first.
Okay.
What personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble?
Sarcasm.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of suffer from that myself. But I wouldn't give it up.
No way.
I love it. I'm embrace it.
You just have embrace it and learn to shape it.
That's right.
Maybe
That's right.
dull it, the skosh.
Sarcastic people are my favorite people.
Yeah.
All right. Here's our final question, the deep question. What lessons in life did you learn the hard way?
That money is just a construct. All right, that my bank account is the reflection of my level of service, and I learned it the hard way because I grew up we didn't have a whole lot of money, and there was a lot of money fear. So so it took me and that's why I'll call it the hard way. I'll also call it the long way to learn that money is just a damn construct. It's a consequence, okay, that I can create. If I want money, I go create it. It doesn't run me. But it took me a long time to learn that.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Now, how can we get more? I see all kinds of reasons based on this conversation why people might want to become more mentally tough. We've got just so many nuggets in there. How can we get more Chris Dorris?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to strongly encourage folks to just go to my homepage, right? Because there's two things that you can do right there. And my homepage is ChristopherDorris.com. And my last name is Dorris. So ChristopherDorris.com. And when you go there, you can sign up for a couple things, both of which are totally free. The first is the Daily Dose. There'll be a sign-up box on the right-hand side. And the Daily Dose is the full title is the Daily Dose Mental Toughness Tips in 30 Seconds or Less. So when you sign up for that, do that when you're like in your home time zone, because then at 6 a.m. every day of the year, you will have delivered in your email box a nugget of mental toughness that you can read in 30 seconds or less, but then commit the day to. Have it be like some of them are practices, invitations to integrate some thought or some mantra or some actual practice into the day that would have you develop more mental toughness. And then the other thing at the bottom of the homepage would be to sign up for my video blog, my email list, my normal email list, which also notifies you when there's a new video blog, written blog, or my podcast, which is called Tough Talks on Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness.
And I can attest that those are all...
and people can find everything else. Yeah.
Yep, I can attest those are all well worthwhile. Sometimes I read your tip in the morning and I go, but I don't want to be mentally tough today. I want to be mentally weak. We all have those
and you
days.
Get to choose that.
I do.
That's one of the biggest takeaways is that we all have the power to choose.
Yes, we absolutely do. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think this is going to be one of my podcasts where people are going to want to go back and listen more than once, because there's so much depth and so many great nuggets in there. And if this stuff was easy and intuitive, we'd all already be there. But it really is something I think that you've got to visit and revisit and practice, like anything else in your life, in order to be able to really put it into play and move toward what you really want your life to be. So thank you, Chris.
Well, I want to say thank you for the invitation. All right, I loved our conversation, and I must tell you that you are a phenomenal interviewer. I thought to myself on multiple occasions during this conversation, like, we didn't plan this. We had you and I did not speak one word about, except that you sent me an email with, like you said, we probably will talk maybe about a couple things, like the pivot points. That's it. But you asked questions as if we had pre-planned this.
Oh, thank you. I
so
appreciate
your
that.
ability to segue is phenomenal. So you just made it so easy to have a meaningful and very pleasant dialogue, and I hope a lot of people hear it and benefit from it. So
well,
Julie.
I think people's career stories are fascinating and instructive and helpful because we're still at that up to 70% of people are unhappy at work, and that needle hasn't moved. And we're not,
in 30 years, not in 30 years. I think it's even more than that.
No. And so if people's stories can be helpful, maybe that's a way to move that needle, and that would make me do the happy dance. That would make me come home at the end of the day with a smile on my face. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Julie.
If you enjoyed meeting the Evolved Careerist on today's episode, well, we've got a lot more lined up for you. Subscribe, tell your friends, rate us and write a review. And of course, follow us on social media. But if you're interested in learning more about how you can evolve your career, you can contact us through theevolvedcareer.com or thebaukegroup.com, and that's Bauke. Do you know somebody who'd be a great guest, who has a great career story to tell? Or do you think you qualify? Then email me. My email address is in the podcast description. Until next time, here's to your career happiness.